let's begin. So Bitcoin is essentially the world's first open source, decentralized digital currency and payment network. The reason that a lot of people find these technologies very confusing, I find, is that it's actually multiple things combined into one. So one of the characteristics of, for example, Bitcoin is that it's a currency kind of like gold, dollars, or rupees. The value of Bitcoin goes up and down, it's fairly volatile, but at the same time, it tends to go upwards. The other element of this technology is that it also essentially is rails for moving value from one point to another. So it's analogous to Visa, PayPal, or something like Western Union. And because you have both these technologies kind of combined into one, oftentimes it's kind of easy to find it really, really confusing. So just a little bit about my background real quick. So I was born and raised in Canada. I graduated as an electrical engineer. I studied finances after graduating as an engineer. I actually ran my own financial brokerage for about 4 or 5 years. And I had this odd thing happen to me where the more I learned about finance, the less I felt like I understood it. And I felt that there were a lot of kind of basic fundamental questions about money that went unanswered. Things like, what is inflation? Or where does money come from? Or why is it that when I want to send my grandmother in India $100, middlemen take away $20 and it takes me a week to get that money to her? Why is it that when I want to buy a pizza on the phone, I have to give the guy on the phone the numbers that he needs to steal my money? Right? So there's all these little weird things about money that never really made sense, and everyone said, don't worry about it, that's just how it is. And then I actually ended up leaving the financial industry before the big crash in 2008, and I spent about maybe 8 years of my career not in finance. I actually ended up in robotics, and I sold robots to every university from Georgia Tech to University of Toronto to IITs to MITs. And about 5 years ago, the CEO of my company said, hey, why don't you go out to India and try and sell us some robots there? I said, fine. I got on a plane and I went all the way out to Bangalore, and I started selling robots there. Around that time, I discovered the white paper for Bitcoin and became obsessed and just couldn't stop thinking about it, and couldn't help but feel that the Bitcoin white paper was essentially hinting towards the truth of what might be the solution to some of these problems that I'd sensed before. And so I went into hibernation for about 6 months. All I did was read the white paper, and if you haven't read the Bitcoin white paper, I suggest that you do. And when I came out of that slumber, I decided that, because I didn't have any friends in Bangalore, I decided that I would start India's first Bitcoin meetup groups. And so what started off as me and 2 other people staring at each other eventually grew to thousands of people. And through that meetup group, really I ended up finding Satvik, who's the CEO of Unocoin today. And today we run India's biggest blockchain company, Bitcoin company. And so, but before we kind of got there, it was a long road. We knew that we wanted to be in Bitcoin, but we didn't know where the opportunity was. And so, we took the only approach that we knew how to, which is we took a very scientific approach. We said, in science class, what do? You have a hypothesis, and then you test it out, and you see if that hypothesis sticks. If it doesn't, you move on to something else. And so we ran the country's largest Bitcoin mining operation. We did Bitcoin conferences like these. We did lots of different things. But we always struggled to kind of identify a real home run. And so about 4.5 years ago, we would have people show up at our meetups with big bags full of cash, saying, hey, I want to buy some Bitcoin from you guys. And coming from the finance kind of world, I realized that probably wasn't the safest way to go about doing things. And at the same time, in places like Canada, the United States, and all over, it was very, very easy to buy Bitcoin. You can just log on to a website and you can buy some Bitcoin. So what we did is we said, hey, instead of trying to build something that other people want, why don't we build something that we want? And at the time, there was no brokerage in India. So we said, let's scratch our own niche. Hint, hint, I think that's really the best way. If there are people in this room who are thinking about starting their own business, I really think that the best way to do it is by building a product for yourself. And the beauty of that is that That way, even if you build this thing and nobody else uses it, you'll have at least one person, right? Yourself. And so we did exactly that. We said, hey, let's build something that we would want to use. And to our surprise, within about a week or 2 weeks of us launching our platform, hundreds of people started coming onto the platform, started using it, started buying and selling Bitcoin, and we were off to the races. 6 months into that, we essentially raised a round of financing from an entity called DCG, Digital Currency Group. Some of you may have heard of them. So DCG is one of the leading investors in this space. They've invested in over 100 Bitcoin companies around the world, including Coinbase, which is worth over $2 billion, including every one of them. Ripple, there's BitPay, Kraken. They're all essentially been invested by DCG. So DCG invested in UnoCoin as its kind of India bet, and that was about 3 years ago. And we had maybe 10 or 12 employees. We had maybe about 10,000 users at the time. And then fast forwarding over to about a year ago, we did another capital raise where, if you guys might have heard of the Drapers, so we went through the Boost program, so Tim Draper and Adam Draper. We also went through Funders Club, they're investors of ours, and Bloom Ventures out of India. And so there's a whole range of kind of different investors that came together to support our last round. But the thing I wanted to mention is that at UnoCoin, it took us 3 years to get to our first 100,000 users. So it took us 3 years to get to 100,000 users. Today we're adding about 100,000 users every 2 weeks, right? Just to give you kind of the rate at which this space is accelerating. It's really, really staggering. And for us, it was really our mission from the beginning was to bring Bitcoin to billions, and we wanted to just make money simple. We thought that money was overly complicated and it didn't need to be, and we thought Bitcoin could potentially solve a lot of these problems. So what are some of the big applications that we see of Bitcoin technology in India? So one of the biggest applications is, you may have heard of this, is that Bitcoin is often referred to as digital gold, right? Does anybody know why it's called digital gold? Anyone take a guess? No? Why is Bitcoin called digital gold? Tone? It's limited. Exactly. So gold, so again, I wasn't born in India, but it gets harder and harder to find. I wasn't born in India, but I've spent a lot of time there. I run a business there. My mom's sitting in the middle here. She loves gold. Indian women own more gold than the United States government. Did you know that? Right? So gold is huge in India. Here, it's not such a big deal. In India, literally, come payday, there's a lineup at the bank for people to turn their cash into gold. So why is gold, not just valued in India, but all over the world? And do you ask yourself questions like, where does money come from, right? And that was one of the big questions that we at UnoCoin, we were always asking ourselves. And if you look at it, it's actually a really interesting story, right? If you look at the history of money, people think that these pieces of paper in our pocket with people's faces on it, this is money. But that's not where money actually originated from, right? Money originated from a societal need. It wasn't something that government said, oh, you must use this. It was actually a need. And the need arose from, well, actually, if you break it down, it's very simple. Let's just rewind 100,000 years ago. I'm in the middle of a jungle. I just killed a caribou for my family. I'm going to go take it home. And all of a sudden, Tone comes to me in the middle of the jungle and he says, Sonny, I got a family too, but I'm just not as big as you, maybe not as strong as you. Can you help me share some of your caribou? And I tell him, you know what, buddy? Either I say I don't like you, or if I do like him, I might turn to him and say, here, have some. But in that moment, what are the chances that he would happen to have the 3 cups of rice that my family needs? It's actually probably non-existent. So in fact, what would happen is people would literally just maintain a mental ledger, a subjective ledger. So I would literally just remember that I gave Tone some caribou or some meat, and he would remember, and maybe 6 months down the road, we would see each other again, and we would say, hey, look, I give you some rice, you owe me. Right? And people literally just remember this stuff, and the important thing is in a mental ledger. But that didn't seem very efficient, so what did people start doing? They started using things like seashells. In some tribes, they use things like salt, right? But the problem with that was that, let's say, for example, my tribe over here is using seashells, and the tribe over there is using Saul, how can my tribe and his tribe trade? They can't. So essentially what happened is for the first time ever, we had subjective ledgers in our head. We moved to objective ledgers, like using seashells and things of that sort. And for the first time, about 10,000 years ago, humanity started using things like universal ledgers. And what's a universal ledger? Gold. Gold acts as a ledger system because it's limited in nature. Because gold can be, for example, if I give him the caribou, he can give me a tiny bit of gold, or in exchange for a house or bread, I can give him gold, and it stands as a measure of accounting to keep kind of tabs of what's happening. And so gold, again, emerged naturally, not by force, but essentially naturally from the free market as a form of money. And then about 50, 60 years ago, what happened is that we had this fiat-based system where people started using dollars that would be backed by gold, and then at a certain point, the United States government said, hey, look, we're so powerful, we don't need to back our money with gold, we'll just back everybody else's money with our money. And that's kind of a good thing, I guess, but as we heard, Edmund Moy talk about today, right? The government has a monopoly on money, and he was the guy that was at the the mint. He was literally the guy at the U.S. Mint, and he is saying that perhaps there's room for competition, right? Maybe the free markets can come back to life and propose a challenge to Bitcoin, to the fiat currencies that we have today. And so the problems with some of the fiat currencies that we have today is that, you guys remember we talked about inflation at the beginning of this? So, do we know why inflation happens? Anybody? Brian, you want to take a guess? Too much printing money. Exactly, right? So even young guys know this now. So the reason, when you have $100 and you put it under your mattress, a year later that $100 is worth $97. You can't even buy the same shoes you could buy a year ago. But why does our money lose value? Like, do we ever ask ourselves these questions? Like, I started to, but I stopped because people would just say, oh, don't ask those questions. But I found out later that the reason your money loses value is because we print so much of it. We print more and more and more every single year. So Bitcoin stands for something a little bit different. Bitcoin isn't something that you can just print willy-nilly. You can't just change the supply. There's actually a fixed supply, and the supply actually tends towards 21 million by the year 2140. And it is, like Tone said, one of the first real forms of scarce money. And when I say it's really scarce, it's digitally scarce, you cannot create more than 21 million Bitcoins, period. But guess what? With gold, tomorrow we could find out that some temple in India just found 50 tons of gold. Or you could find out that, there's this new technology that Elon Musk discovered, and they're going to take down, a comet in the middle of space, and now we've got infinite amounts of gold. My point is even that perfect form of money that all of us use for many years isn't really perfect. But Bitcoin essentially emulates gold, and it is essentially this beautiful form of digital gold, right? Now, why is that exciting? So, like I said, I run a company in India where we are essentially testing the hypothesis that Bitcoin may be a better form of money, maybe a better form of gold. And I would say about 40 to 50% of our use case of people using our platform is actually using it as a form of preserving their wealth. When I bought my first Bitcoin at about $15, and today's Bitcoin's worth $20,000. That's a much better store of value in terms of like when I work hard than something that loses 3% or 4% every single year, right? So digital gold is, again, one, I would say, very, very exciting part of this like Bitcoin movement. I know a lot of the speakers today they're going to talk about blockchain. Some people are going to talk about ICOs. But I'm here to tell you that the real revolution is Bitcoin. I'm a big believer in Bitcoin, and even though the news and sometimes you hear negative things about it, I would actually not listen to that as much and really try and do your own research, go to the internet, and try and learn as much as you can. The second big use case that we're finding at our company, that why people are using Bitcoin is for the purpose of remittance, is for the purposes of sending money over borders. Now, if you think about it today, right, if I want to send an email to, let's say, my father-in-law in Bogota, I can actually do that at the click of a button. It takes seconds, and it doesn't cost me any money. But why is it that if I want to send him $100, again, it takes a week or something, and they take like $20? That just doesn't seem fair. In a day and age when money is nothing more than information, why is it that it costs so much money and so much time to send money? So with things like Bitcoin, this is really starting to change. I would say about 20% of our user base in India, and so not only is India the largest gold market, India is also the largest inward remittance market as well. And these are two reasons why we think Bitcoin is super exciting there. But we're seeing more and more people saying to us, saying, hey, I used to use PayPal, or I used to use Western Union, and I used to lose, if I got $1,000 from my Silicon Valley counterpart, maybe I get $920 in my bank account 4 days later. And that's not acceptable. But with using Bitcoin, and using UnoCoin, and using different solutions that we provide, people get their money within the hour, and they get all their money. And so just think of someone like who's really poor, maybe in India. For them, $80 is a lot of money. So if we can help them, and time is also important. So from our case, those are the two big use cases that we've seen. Yes, sir.
So where's the profit for UnoCoin come from?
So the question was where does the profit come from? How do we make money as a company? So as a company, we make money in two different ways. The first way we make money is we have something called a fee. So if somebody buys Bitcoin on our platform, we charge a 1% fee. So and now the other way that companies like ours also make money is there's sometimes a tiny spread, or maybe not so tiny spread sometimes in terms of between the buy and the sell price. So our platform, we're a brokerage platform, but then there's also order book exchanges as well, which is something we're looking into launching. Maybe I'll just pause there. Any questions? I've been kind of blabbering on. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So you mentioned that Bitcoin has a fixed supply.
Yeah.
And the only issue that I see with that is that there seems to be like an apparent amount of trademark infringement on Bitcoin. Like you can't just open a company and call it McDonald's Hamburgers because McDonald's is dramatic. But we see today now we've got Bitcoin Cash, gold, diamond, platinum, and there's just money spooning into all these other side companies, and nobody's really protecting the Bitcoin trademark itself. That's what I'm saying, yeah. So don't you see that as an increase in the amount of supply?
That's a good question. I don't know if Tone probably has a much better answer than I do. Go ahead.
I've been saying that for a while, that it is. If you believe in altcoins, then you really don't believe that Bitcoin has a fixed supply.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that all altcoins are going zero, so I'm okay with that. Right?
Yeah,
I end up in these arguments. People are like, well, Bitcoin's going to have all this competition. I'm like, well, then you don't believe in hard money. So it's a really interesting debate. I
think so too. I wanted to hear Tone's perspective. So even though we have a bunch of people that represent ICOs at this event, just on a personal note, I've never put a penny into an ICO. And so I tend to agree with Tone that I think that a lot of the forks, a lot of the clones, for me, are not very exciting. And by the way, when somebody creates a fork and calls it Bitcoin Cash or whatever, it's important to know that that's not Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is still limited. But because of the open source nature of Bitcoin, people can fork it, they can make their own versions of it. But regarding your question about trademark, is the word internet trademark?
Yeah, I was going to say that also.
Is it? I don't know, I'm just a question. But I don't imagine it to be, but I could create something and call it Internet Sunny, but I doubt anybody would use it. Maybe a few would, but...
It's a bigger problem on the other side. If someone didn't have control of the trademark, then it could end in a much worse way.
Right. Yeah.
But people are using the alternatives. If we call it Internet Sunny, we used it, but people are using it for cash. It's huge.
No,
Well, it's really going hard there.
there's different environments.
Yeah. And you know what? And look, I personally don't believe in Bitcoin Cash, right? But I'll tell you, more than Bitcoin, I'm a fan of the free market. So meaning, if Bitcoin Cash is better, then it should win. I don't think it will, but I'm just saying is I'm not against other people trying.
No, I don't think it will either. It's just discussing the risk to the brand. So.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some risk there, but I don't know exactly how to. Yes, sir.
Question for you, two-part. What impacts did India's demonetization policy have on your business? B, we heard Ed talk this morning about companies outlawing Bitcoin. And just like how we saw this demonetization policy come up almost overnight, real announcements. think like it could have in the future that Bitcoin could be outlawed in India just because of the reasons of why they went through the demonetization are actually more like feasible other than Bitcoin.
So I heard the Indian government banned GitHub at one point, right? So I mean, like they've taken pretty knee-jerk reaction in the past. If they ban Bitcoin in the future, would I be super surprised? No, right? But as a company, we've been working really hard for the last 4 or 5 years. We not only have the best techno-legal firm in the country, we also get invited to many kind of closed-door meetings with every 3-letter agency in the country you can think of. And we're doing our best to educate lawmakers and the public at large. But still, the government is just one of those things where there's just so many different departments and that you can be totally confident about 9 out of the 10 people you're talking to, but then the 10th guy wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, he reads an article about Bitcoin, and now all of a sudden. So my point is there's always that. I think anybody in Bitcoin probably knows that that may happen. But now to kind of jump back to your first question, demonetization. So for those who don't know, demonetization, so the Indian government about 6 months ago, no, about a year ago, all of a sudden just said that all the cash that you have, it no longer is relevant. It's toilet paper. And what they said is that what we'll do is we'll issue new currency, and you will bring your rupees to the bank and prove that you have, paid taxes and whatnot. And if you can do so, we will then issue you new notes, these new notes. And so that, created a huge problem in India. Like if you go on the internet and look it up, you'll see pictures of like literally people, like hundreds and hundreds of people lining up at ATM machines trying to get out their own money. Right? Really sad. Like I heard over 100 people died in India because of this, right? But what did it do for our business? Best marketing campaign ever, right? Like we actually, we went from 5,000 visitors a day to 15,000 in like a 2-week time frame. So for us, it's obviously had a and the thing about governments in general is that it's a double-edged sword, right? On one side, like if they do something negative or say something negative, it kind of achieves their goal, but on the flip side, it's kind of like, it just opens up a whole can of worms, and now all of a sudden more people want to get into Bitcoin because the government's saying it might not be, all that it's cracked up to be. So, yeah.
Did you see yesterday's news from India? It's about to triple your business.
Tell me, which way go?
They're implementing bail-ins.
Oh God! Well, I spent yesterday.
Yeah, just came out.
Actually, is the guy from Neo here? No. Okay, so he's outside. So some of you may have heard of NeoNB, which is a company out of Cyprus that was doing Bitcoin and whatnot. And I was talking to him about the bail-ins. Is anyone aware of what the bail-ins are? No? Nobody knows what a bail-in. So has anyone heard of the bailout? So a bailout is what? It's where banks get bailed out by the government, right? A bail-in is, okay, I'm not even kidding about this. This actually happened, and he's saying it's going to happen in India. In Cyprus, which is a country, when the governments and banks ran out of money, this is about, 3 years ago, they literally went into everybody's bank account. And if you had more than $100,000, they took half of it. They took half of it. Just Google the word bail-in, and he's saying it's coming to India, which will again help Bitcoin.
Yeah, they're adding it to their law.
Actually, forget India. Ireland, even Canada is considering it. So. There you go. So you're living in it. So anyway, so I'm sure that'll. And again, people wonder why people are so interested in Bitcoin, right? It's just that it's just sound money. Any other questions? So I wanted to actually give the next 15 minutes to another gentleman. He's one of the founders of a company called Ucash. I'm really excited about it. So what Ucash is looking to do is they're actually partnering with money service businesses. So when you walk down Yonge Street and every second store is like a Western Union so they're actually going into those stores and converting those stores into places where people can buy and sell Bitcoin. And I think that's just super exciting. So please help me welcome Brian Fan.